2 Softball Southeast Regional.
The sun is shining on a beautiful Friday afternoon at Haynes and Carolyn Hill Stadium in historic Dahlonega, Georgia. The stakes don't get much higher than this. It's win or go home between two teams that know each other all too well. It's Game 5 of the NCAA Division II Softball Southeast Regional Tournament. And for the 7th time this season and the 2nd time in this tournament, it's the number 2 seed North Georgia Nighthawks facing off against the number 7 seed Flagler College Saints. Glad to have you all with us alongside Devin Kupka and the rest of the NSN team. Robert DiClemente on hand for you today. Let's recap how we got here. This is a rematch from yesterday after the Nighthawks took care of the Saints in the opening game of the tournament. And earlier today, North Georgia fell in a grueling 9-inning game 1-2 to Francis Marion, who advanced to the championship game tomorrow. Devin, you were just on the call for that previous game. Flagler ended Columbus State's season in a must-win game to advance to another do-or-die game against the Nighthawks right here.
Yeah, Flagler was able to pretty much execute on all cylinders against Columbus State, able to pick up some much-needed runs as North Georgia was able to shut them out yesterday. They looked pretty hot, really that whole game, and it's something you want to see from a team that didn't show a whole lot in yesterday's game against North Georgia, but it's going to be an exciting one for sure, Robert.
So we should be in for an exciting finish to this Friday evening of Division II softball. Again, glad to have you all with us. Katie Ward leading things off for North Georgia. She's going to be out at first. Quick first out up on the board. It's going to bring Georgia Blair up to bat here for North Georgia. A couple of changes to this starting lineup for the Nighthawks compared to what we saw earlier today against FMU. Georgia Blair second in the batting order, and following her is going to be Mallory Parker, Mary Seal Brumby, Madison Simmons, and for the first time this tournament, we're going to see number 8, Tegan Laval Masonette in the starting lineup for North Georgia. This is her 17th start of the season. Coach Davenport putting the redshirt freshman in a big spot here. Following Masonette in the lineup is Riley Moody, Gracie Mixon, and then Mariah Wicker is going to round out the batting order for North Georgia. We saw Mariah Wicker in the batting order towards the top of the batting order earlier today. It was Riley Moody who rounded out that lineup for North Georgia, but instead it's going to be Wick who is in the 9-hole slot here for North Georgia.
Yeah, you mentioned there are some lineup changes in North Georgia's. Once again, the lineup is ever evolving. You can kind of see a couple pieces taken not normally in the starting lineup. You'll see her normally in a pinch hitter role coming in later in a game, but unless she's in the starting lineup, Riley Moody moves up a couple of spots as well. Still over there at shortstop. Normally she's the one that rounds out the batting order, but now she's batting in the 7-hole for the Nighthawks.
And if you tuned into that Flagler-Columbus State matchup about an hour ago, Flagler's starting lineup looks identical to what we saw in that Columbus State matchup, including the pitcher who's in the circle right now, Rachel Hester. Finished out that game for the Saints about an hour ago, ending Columbus State's season in a 6-4 win for them, and so she's carrying some momentum into this game as Parker pops one into left foul territory. Couple of Saints in the area. Couldn't make a play, though. So the count's going to be 0-2 for Mallory Parker.
Yeah, you got to imagine both teams are desperate to get the win. North Georgia trying to defend their national championship, but then on the flip side, Flagler picking up their first win in 12 seasons. And the last time it was in the same tournament as Columbus State, picking up their last regional win.
Georgia Blair's going to make a break for it to second, slide in safely. And that's typical to see from North Georgia, getting a stolen base with limited outs up on the scoreboard. Makes things a bit easier here for Mallory Parker with a runner in scoring position now in Georgia Blair.
Yeah, and this is definitely something North Georgia needs, coming out not necessarily flat against
That ball gets away from the shortstop. Sydney Stewart couldn't make the play. Georgia Blair is going to stay put, though, at second. But it's going to put 2 runners on here for Mary Seal Brumby.
Yeah, and going back to what I was trying to say earlier, North Georgia earlier in the day, not to say that they came out flat at all, but they had 8 or 9 hits in that game for only 1 run in that entire game. Both pitching staffs had both the Patriots and Nighthawks had great days on the mound, but North Georgia looking to break through. They are in these do or die situation because it's not like the Peach Belt tournament where, okay, we know we're going to be in the regional next week. No, in fact, their season could come to an end here. And you certainly don't want that to happen, especially being the defending champions and going home in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Brumby fouls this one behind her to move the count to 1-2. But Devin, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's win or go home. Whoever loses this matchup, their season's over. They're going home after this, and the winner of this game is going to play Francis Marion tomorrow in the championship game at noon to try to advance to the Super Regional. And there's still a lot of question marks up in the air as to who's going to host the Southeast portion of the Super Regional tournament. Wingate, the number 1 seed in the Southeast Regional right now, in a matchup with another Peach Belt Conference school in Lander. Last time we checked, Lander was up on Wingate in that game. We'll have updates for you as we go along, but there's still a lot of question marks here in this tournament as Brumby has the good eye to take ball 4. And in the top of the first, bases are loaded for Madison Simmons.
Yeah, real quickly, a score update. Number 5, Lander up 2-0 over Wingate in the top of the 3rd inning right over there in Wingate, North Carolina. But this is a good situation, bringing it back to this game. North Georgia, bases loaded, a huge opportunity here, maybe to tie the most amount of runs they've had all weekend, which was 4 against this Flagler team yesterday.
Madison Simmons had the most success against Flagler yesterday. She went 1 for 3 at the plate, but that was a big one, a 2-run bomb to help propel North Georgia's lead. Ended up coming away with the 4-0 win over Flagler on Friday. Or on Thursday, excuse me. As Simmons keeps this one in the infield, and North Georgia on the board first. A perfectly placed ball by Madison Simmons. Saints can't make a play. Blair comes home, and it's an early 1-0 lead for North Georgia.
That was huge for the Nighthawks. Look, bases still loaded, only 1 out in the top of the 1st inning. And we're able to get a score up on the board. Huge opportunity here for the Nighthawks as Tegan Laval Masonette up to bat.
Tegan, a redshirt freshman out of McDonough, Georgia. Last appearance she made for the Nighthawks was against Columbus State in the Peach Belt Conference Tournament Championship, went 0 for 1 in that game. Looking for her first hit since April 14th, or against April 21st, I should say, against Lander.
Yeah, and Tegan's come in some good spots this year and able to get the bat warmed up. It's going to be exciting to see what she has in store for the Nighthawks offense today.
She takes ball 2 from Rachel Hester, so it's a 2-1 count for Tegan. Rachel Hester in the circle for the Saints, bringing a lot of momentum into this matchup. She's played a lot of time here in this NCAA regional tournament. Played yesterday, played today. This is her 2nd consecutive game she's appeared in for Flagler. Masonette up in the count, 3-1. Comes the 3-1 pitch. This is going to be low and in the dirt. With bases loaded, Mallory Parker is going to trot home. Nighthawks with an early 2-0 lead after a bases loaded walk.
Not sure if that might have hit Tegan in the foot there, as right in that general vicinity, because it had that bounce off the turf, but looks like everybody's okay. Bases still loaded, 1 out. Top of the 1st, not a start Flaglers wanted, especially with how hot they were in that game against Columbus State that just finished less than an hour ago.
Riley Moody now up to bat here for North Georgia. And having just played about an hour ago, that game just wrapping up about an hour ago up to this point, comes with its pros and its cons. You know, if you're the type of player that rides high off of the momentum of that win coming into this matchup, that could work in your favor. But then for some other players, you know, having played a game not that long ago, could see some fatigue here from some of the Saints. So it can work, it can go either way. Just depends on the type of player that you are. And Rachel Hester not off to the start here that the Saints wanted, so it's going to be a visit in the circle for the Peach Belt Conference Co-Coach of the Year.
Yeah, North Georgia, not a team that's easily going to go down. I mean, I think they're really hungry, and not saying that the loss earlier was a shock to anybody, because Francis Marion has shown that they are a really, really good team. You know, North Georgia was able to hit on them, but they weren't able to score on them and get any runs. So, you know, and a little bit of that energy is kind of transferring over into this game too.
So with Riley Moody up to bat, bases still loaded, still one out. Nighthawks with a 2-0 lead. The 2-1 to Moody fouls this one back to even up the count at 2-2.
Can't recall the last batter that North Georgia had in the batter's box in this game that had 2 strikes.
The 2-2 to Moody takes ball 3 close to fill up the count, and Riley Moody has really had a coming out party for North Georgia as of late. Went 2 for 4 earlier today against Francis Marion. Takes the payoff pitch. This one's going right back to Hester. Play is made at home plate. So Brumby will be out. But the bases will remain loaded. 2 outs up on the scoreboard for the senior out of Cherokee High School, Gracie Mixon.
Yeah, it was a good play by Flagler, getting the runner from third to come, get tagged out at home plate. North Georgia staying up 2-0 over Flagler.
Yeah, for the time being, that's the right play there by the Saints. It's to keep a runner from coming home. You still keep the bases loaded. With 2 outs up on the board, Saints are going to try to close this inning out unless Gracie Mixon has something to say about it.
You know what this game is kind of reminding me of, Robert? It's kind of reminding me of the Peach Belt Conference Championship game that was just played here last weekend. Remember, North Georgia, a little bit later in the game, they switched to Tybee Denton. Now, results are a little bit different when it came to that game 1 result because, you know, North Georgia ended up losing that second game of the championship.
Mixon lands this one in right center field. This is going to score 2 runs. Make that 3. Gracie Mixon magic here in the top of the first. And it's a 5-0 lead for North Georgia.
Yeah, and going to the point I was saying there, you know, North Georgia, you know, we put Tybee late. The Nighthawks put Tybee late in that game. Columbus State comes back, wins it. Tybee starts immediately the next game, and Columbus State jumps out to an early lead on North Georgia. And that's kind of reminding me, kind of, you know, it's similar here where, you know, Rachel Hester finished that game out for the Saints, and she's immediately starting at the beginning of this game. It reminds me very much of how the PBC title game went.
Yeah, a couple of similarities between those 2 games. North Georgia was unable to come away with the win in that first game on Saturday in the PBC championship. The Saints, riding high off of that win, they just ended a PBC opponent in Columbus State. Their season is done. So they're trying to build some momentum here in this matchup as Mariah Wicker keeps this inning going for North Georgia. The throw to home plate is on time for out number 3. But how about this? A 5-run top of the first inning for North Georgia. Sees them up 5-0. Some Mixon magic. 3 RBIs for the vet. Puts North Georgia up 5-0. Saints got some work to do early when we come back on the Nighthawk Sports Network.
I am an NCAA student athlete.
And I pledge to be a champion of unity
on my team
on my campus and in my community.
I pledge to embrace differences and strive for inclusion and collaboration.
I pledge to stand against racism, hate, and discrimination.
I pledge to strive for love, care, and forgiveness.
I pledge to stand against silence, deceit, and obscurity.
I pledge to strive for dialogue, truth, and understanding.
I pledge to stand against fear and doubt.
I pledge to strive for trust and belief in one another.
I pledge to stand against complacency and stagnancy.
I pledge to strive for change and growth.
I commit to supporting my fellow student athletes in all circumstances that impact them.
I commit to both choosing unity personally and encouraging it for all.
I pledge these things because we are stronger together.
United as one.
3.
Leading off for the Saints, the shortstop, number 2, Sydney
Back
Stewart.
with you here at Haynes and Carolyn Hill Stadium, bottom of the first inning. Nighthawks exploded for 5 runs in the top of the first. Brings the Saints up to bat here in this winner-go-home game. In game number 5 of the NCAA Division II Southeast Regional. Again, glad to have you all with us today. If you're just now joining us, as this ball is hit into right foul territory by the leadoff batter, Sydney Stewart. If you're just now joining us in that top of the first inning, the Nighthawks racked up 4 hits. Madison Simmons got the scoring started, a hit and an RBI attached to it. And with bases loaded, Tegan Laval Masonette drew a walk to put the Nighthawks up 2-0. And then Gracie Mixon slapped one into right center field, put 3 RBIs up on the board. That's how we got to this 5-0 lead for North Georgia. Like we mentioned in that top of the first inning, the batting order looks identical to what we just saw in that Flagler-Columbus State matchup. Sydney Stewart leading things off for the Saints. Following her in the lineup is Emily Ritchie, Hannah Smith, Cassidy Crump, Kyla Kinnear, Mackenzie Smith, Riley Konowalchuk, Kirsten James, and Paige Maseda rounds out the batting order. And getting the start in the circle here for the Nighthawks is none other than the Peach Bell Conference Pitcher of the Year in Tybee Denton. And if you're a frequent listener on the Nighthawk Sports Network, you've heard us talk time and time again about Tybee Denton. She is dominant, and she is a winner, one of the most winningest players in Division II softball. And she has dominated when it comes to the statistical categories in the Peach Bell Conference, leads the PBC in just about every pitching category. And she is going to be one of the toughest pitchers that opponents are going to have to face against North Georgia as she plunks Stewart here on her first assignment of the day.
Yeah, for the most part, for most of the year, Tybee's really been in a league of her own. Obviously, the Peach Bell Conference Pitcher of the Year. Kind of been on an island of her own. I guess you could say Tybee Island, because there is an island in Georgia called Tybee Island right there, a little south of, or just right next to Savannah, Georgia.
That's good. We'll need to get our social team on that nickname there for Tybee.
Yeah, Tybee Island.
As this is going to be grounded from Richie. Moody throws to first. Gets it on time for out number 1. That's going to advance Stewart into scoring position over there at second base, and it's going to bring up the first baseman, Hannah Smith.
You know, one thing, Robert, that one thing with North Georgia this year is their fielding has been really clean, and we've seen some of the games this weekend in this Southeast Regional Tournament where some of the teams' fielding wasn't the best.
This is hit well into left field. Mariah Wicker is there to make the play, and she's going to keep Sydney Stewart on second base.
Yeah, and to continue the thought, you know, some of the fielding hasn't been the best, and that's what's going to be the key here. You know, Flagler, not to say that they did a bad job or they got lucky or anything, but there were a lot of fielding mistakes made by the Columbus State Cougars in the last game that, you know, Flagler able to get a couple of additional runs just due to some of the mistakes that Columbus State was able to make. So North Georgia, you know, they got to make sure, especially on the defensive and fielding side of things, to make sure everything is fielded cleanly, because Flagler has been able to take advantage of that, especially given seeing what they did in the last game to Columbus State.
This is hit to Moody lobs it to first to get the out. What a play by Riley Moody. A couple balls going her way, makes the connection to Mary Seal Brumby at first, keeps the Saints off the scoreboard in the bottom of the first. We're headed to the top of the second. Nighthawks up 5-0 in Game 5 of the Division II Softball Southeast Regional. Back with you here on the Nighthawk Sports Network. North Georgia up to bat here in the top of the second, up 5-0 over the Saints in a win-or-go-home game in the NCAA Division II Softball Southeast Regional Tournament. And the Peach Belt Conference Co-Coach of the Year, Catherine Grant, had seen enough of Rachel Hester. An early pitching substitution for them. Now in the circle for the Saints is number 22, Jordan Sheets.
And Robert, I think that's a move that you kind of have to make given the first inning that Rachel Hester had, allowing 5 runs in a situation that against the Nighthawks, you really haven't fared all too well against them just this year. So I can kind of see why they've made the change this early on.
Jordan Sheets, a sophomore out of Newport Richey, Florida, and River Ridge High School. Last appearance for her was against North Georgia back on April 27th. Big swing here from Katie Ward, but a miss is going to make the count 1-2. Only pitched 1.2 innings in that matchup, allowed 5 hits and 5 runs. All those runs were earned. Didn't record a strikeout, had 2 walks in that matchup as Ward fouls this one behind her. But we saw the Saints go through a handful of pitchers earlier today against Columbus State. Rachel Hester was one of them. Madeline Wise got the start as Ward hits this to second, throw to first, gets it there on time for out number 1 as Crump makes the connection with Smith at first.
And the key for North Georgia is to keep the pressure up, because that's one thing we saw in the Francis Marion game earlier, where it looked like they'd have things going, but then it would get tough after a little bit for the Nighthawks. And it was in that second inning was the last time that they were able to get any runs the whole day. They only scored 1 run against Francis Marion, and they were able to pick 5 immediately. But North Georgia needs to keep the pressure on Flagler, especially if, let's say they do come away with the win in this game. They're going to have to keep up that pressure because Francis Marion is a really, really good softball team. And, North Georgia, that was probably their toughest opponent they faced all season.
Still got to get past the Saints here, and Georgia Blair looking to warm up the bats today. Earlier against Francis Marion in the first game this afternoon, went 0 for 5 at the plate. An uncharacteristic game from the veteran on this squad, Georgia Blair, who's been the best hitter as of late for North Georgia after Sophie Mooney and Jolie Lester went down. She has 1 hit in total this weekend. That 1 hit coming against Flagler yesterday. She's up in the count right now, 3-1. And she takes strike 2. She was about a third of the way to first base, but instead she's walking back into the batter's box in a full count. Georgia did draw a walk last time she was up to bat. And the payoff pitch. Georgia Blair keeps this one in the infield. Throw to first on time for out number 2. As the third baseman Smith makes the play. So 2 down. Mallory Parker is going to try to keep this inning going for North Georgia. She had the first hit in this game for the Nighthawks. Also scored a run as well off that bases loaded walk that Tagan drew earlier in this one. Takes ball 1 from Jordan Sheets. And the 1-0 going to be left outside for ball 2. Nighthawks very familiar with this Flagler team, like we mentioned in the opener. Already faced each other 6 times this season, seeing each other more than any other opponent this year.
You know, Robert, I was talking to Brendan in our last broadcast that, you know what, in the national championship year, North Georgia had to play Columbus State 7 times. This year they had to play Flagler. They're playing Flagler for their 7th time this year.
Nighthawks trying to make it back to that same spot, the national championship, but they've got work to do here against the Saints. Before they can do that, we are headed to the bottom of the 2nd inning. We'll be back with you here in just a moment on the Nighthawk Sports Network. Five to nothing is your score as we head to the bottom of the 2nd inning. One of these two teams, North Georgia or Flagler, is going to advance to tomorrow's game against Francis Marion. One of these two teams going home after this one. Nighthawks up 5-0, bottom of the 2nd. Flagler up to bat. Leading off this inning is going to be number 24, Kinnear. And this is going to drop in shallow center field on the NG logo. A couple of Nighthawks were in the vicinity to make the play. Parker dove to the turf to try to come up with the play, but instead, Kinnear gets on first, and that's going to be recorded as the first hit of the afternoon here for the Saints.
And, Robert, I mentioned it in that last inning. You know, got to make sure you're fielding everything clean there. A little bit of maybe of a miscommunication from Mallory Parker and Katie Ward.
And a fantastic grab by Mariah Wicker in left. Making a highlight play there. Like you said, Devin, fielding's got to be clean in this one if North Georgia wants to come away with the win, and that's a great start.
You had the redemptive one right there from left fielder Mariah Wicker. Mariah not normally playing in that left field spot. Now, that position for the Nighthawks has rotated a couple of times this year.
Yep.
Obviously, the leadoff hitter went down with an ACL tear, and Jolie Lester. So Sydney Blair has been in that spot. Was in that spot for a while. Now Mariah Wicker reinserted back into the starting lineup, and now she's over there in left field because Wicker normally plays right field, but you know Davenport making some swift changes here late in the season.
Yeah, we've got all seniors in the outfield for North Georgia. Mariah Wicker in left, Mallory Parker in center field, and Madison Simmons in right. Yeah, we've seen a handful of players over there in left field for North Georgia over the course of the season as Tybee Denton delivers the 2-0 and delivers a strike to the Saints and Kona Walchuk to make the count 2-1.
You know, North Georgia's made some great plays on the fielding side of things, and that really might have been one of their first, I would say, mistakes of the day. Didn't really have that, not really any that I could recall against Francis Marion earlier, but, you know, earlier today we saw Riley Moody make a spectacular grab over there at shortstop, so North Georgia not too shy for making some spectacular plays in the outfield or the infield.
And we saw a couple of highlight plays by the two outfields as Kona Walchuk grounds this into left. Mariah Wicker throws to Mixon at third. Nobody home, though. Everybody safe at first and second for the Saints. Yeah, we saw in that first matchup today against North Georgia and Francis Marion, the fielding very clean between those two squads. A couple of highlight plays by the outfield. Mallory Parker had one of those highlight plays earlier today, and in that matchup against Columbus State and Flagler, fielding was also very clean from the Saints as well, which checks out North Georgia and Flagler the top two teams in the Peach Ball Conference when it comes to their fielding. Very rarely do you see errors committed by these two squads. And Tybee Denton is going to have a visit in the circle now with Georgia Blair and assistant coach Aaliyah Medina.
And Robert, the reason why I bring up the fielding aspect is because we've seen 2 games so far this weekend where fielding has come into play, where the team that made the most fielding mistakes ends up getting hurt pretty badly by it. So, that's the reason why you see me hammering that point in, and it's become extremely crucial because, you could have had that easy out at center field there, maybe just a little bit of a miscommunications with Katie Ward and Mallory Parker, but, could easily have 2 outs here, but fielding has been a key factor in some of these games.
That brings Kirsten James up to bat, sophomore out of Woodstock, Georgia, and Etowah High School. And she's seen a lot of run as of recently for the Saints. Coming into today as the throw to second, not there on time. Pickoff attempt over there at first. Coming into today, Kirsten James only with 65 at-bats on the season, 10 RBIs and 4 home runs for the sophomore, though. She has played some great softball as of late as she hits this one into left foul territory, so the count's going to move to 2-2. And the last 2 games that she appeared in were against North Georgia back on April 27th in the Peach Ball Conference Tournament, and then yesterday in Game 1 of the Regionals, went 0 for 3 against North Georgia yesterday. But came in to pinch hit in the Peach Ball Conference Tournament against the Nighthawks. And that one hit was a big one of her 4 home runs this season, as the Saints tried to mount a comeback in that matchup. And the eye from Kirsten James fills up the count.
Yeah, this is going to be big here for Tybee Denton at the mound. A big batter to face off against. You got 2 runners on with only 1 out.
And the payoff pitch from Denton is low for ball 4, and that's one of the very few aspects that Tybee Denton has struggled with this season, is her walks are at a rate that she definitely wouldn't like to see them at. Of course, it's easy to forget that when she's has some of the most strikeouts in Division II softball, 200 plus this season, but she's loaded the bases here with 1 out in the bottom of the 2nd inning.
Yeah, it's going to be really big. This is a big inning for North Georgia. You jump out to that 5-0 lead. You don't want anything to really happen with that because, North Georgia, it's been a struggle to get runs for the most part of this day for them.
This is popped up into left field. Couple Nighthawks in the area, and it's Mariah Wicker who makes the play in foul territory. Keeps all runners on base and puts 2 outs up on the scoreboard. A great hustle play there by Mariah Wicker.
Yeah, another great grab by Wicker in left field. She's making some great plays today over there, coming up with a crucial 2nd out.
And that's great to see from Mariah Wicker, who has struggled as of recently, especially up to bat. We've seen her go in and out of the lineup. She got the start against Francis Marion earlier today, and even though the Nighthawks weren't able to come away with the win, a positive from that game was Mariah Wicker's performance, especially up to bat. Went 2 for 4 at the plate in that matchup, a couple of perfectly placed bunts, and here in this game, she's making some great plays in left field.
Yeah, it's kind of odd when you look at things.
This is grounded. Moody flips it to second on time. Moody almost didn't make the play, which would have put a run up on the board for the Saints. But a great heads-up play, flips it to second, gets the out, and keeps the Saints off the scoreboard. Devin, we'll continue that thought that you had when we come back from this short commercial break on the Nighthawk Sports Network.
In a world driven by innovation and ambition, it's not just about following the path. It's about creating your unique journey. At Francis Marion, you'll acquire the knowledge and skills you need to create the future you want. And you'll do it all surrounded by a community that's strongly committed to your success and your future. Francis Marion University, South Carolina's premier educational choice.
Back with you here on the Nighthawk Sports Network. In the top of the third inning, Nighthawks still with a 5-0 lead after a 5-run top of the first from North Georgia. Nighthawks back up to bat here in the top of the third inning as technically the away team in this matchup for them in the home dugout. Since they were the home team earlier today against Francis Marion, they find themselves as the away team. And I think that has worked out pretty well from them in this matchup, right out of the gate, putting 5 runs up on the board.
Yeah, it's a little different because, North Georgia, it's kind of different for both teams because if you think about it, Flagler, when they're on the road, they're going to be playing as the road team. North Georgia at home as the home team. Things have switched for this last game. North Georgia's the away team.
As Brumby keeps this one in the infield, the out is going to be made at first base as the second baseman, Crump, made the play there, had a bouncing ball go her way, makes the throw to Smith in time for out number 1.
Yeah, that was kind of a little weird pass from Cassidy Crump there over to Hannah Smith. A little high. Could potentially, ball went over Smith's head.
That brings Madison Simmons back up to bat, who takes a strike from Jordan Sheets. Madison Simmons 1 for 1 in this matchup. RBI attached to it to get the scoring started for North Georgia in the top of the first inning. And Madison Simmons, as of late, has had to step up big for the Nighthawks, and she absolutely has, being inserted into the starting lineup after we saw Mariah Wicker go through some struggles, taking over in right field, and she has been up to the task. When you look at her stats from the 2022 NCAA Division II Southeast Regional, where she got a lot of run during that time, she was fantastic. And when it comes to May softball, Simmons is always threatening to make some noise.
Yeah, and to go back on what we were kind of starting to discuss earlier, the two sides have been flipped today. North Georgia now as the away team, so it's got to, if we get to the top of the 7th inning, they're still up. It's still going to be, you got Flagler still to bat in the bottom half of the frame.
As Madison Simmons takes ball 4, put her on first for Tegan Laval Masonette, and it's just so hard to keep the Nighthawks off base, whether that comes by a hit or a walk. Their on-base percentage, one of the best in the country. Rare to see a North Georgia player walking back to the dugout after an at-bat. So Tegan Laval Masonette, the designated player in the starting lineup for Coach Davenport, up to bat. Drew a walk with the bases loaded. Last time she was in the batter's box, finds herself in an evened up 1-1 count against Jordan Sheets. And the 1-1 to Tegan, inside for strike 2. Saints trying to continue this historic season they're on, making the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2012. Posting their most wins since 2017. It's been a great year for them. The 1-2 pitch as Tegan grounds this one into center field, and that's going to get away from Crump. Puts runners on first and second. Another hit up on the scoreboard for the Nighthawks, the first of the day for Tegan, first of this tournament. Runners now on first and second for the shortstop, Riley Moody.
Yeah, Mike Davenport making lineup changes. Riley Moody shifting up a few spots in the batting lineup. Gotta imagine some of those coming off due to the loss earlier today.
As Moody takes strike 1 from Sheets, Coach Davenport, co-coach of the year with Flagler's head coach, Catherine Grant. Congratulations to both of those head coaches on some fantastic seasons. As Riley Moody takes ball 1, North Georgia securing the Peach Belt Conference regular season championship for the 10th consecutive season. Just a historic run that they've been on. And like we were just talking about with Flagler, it's been a historic season for them. Most wins since 2017. back into the NCAA tournament. They have absolutely turned their softball program around in just 1 year. Doubled their win totals from last season. Made it even farther in the PBC tournament than they did last year. And here they are in the Southeast Regional with a chance to advance to tomorrow's game against Francis Marion, trying to send the defending national champions home.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a struggle early on, really for both teams between North Georgia and Francis Marion. I mean, it was tied 1-1 going into the 9th inning. So, I mean, runs were tough to come by. I mean, there were like 5 innings in a row that there were no runs scored from either team.
And whoever ends up facing Francis Marion tomorrow, that is going to be a tough, tough game for them. Francis Marion has looked great over these last 2 days. Payoff pitch to Moody. Fouls this one into left field, so she's going to get another crack at it here. Yeah, Francis Marion taking down Columbus State 8-0 and a 5-inning run rule win for the Patriots. And, of course, taking down North Georgia earlier today in a top 25 ranked matchup. Another payoff pitch to Moody. Fouls this one, this time into right field. So we're going to stay put at the full count. Both of these teams trying to punch their ticket to tomorrow's game against the Patriots. Payoff pitch outside for ball 4. And in the top of the 3rd inning, just like we saw in that top of the 1st, bases are loaded. And this is probably not the player that the Saints want to see in this matchup. Gracie Mixon up to bat with bases loaded and just 1 out up on the board.
Yeah, Gracie Mixon, a very good player for the Nighthawks. She's gotten a couple of good hits in for them this season. Going to be interesting to see what happens here.
Mixon takes strike 1 from Sheets. Mixon had those 3 RBIs earlier in this game in the top of the 1st to help extend this North Georgia lead to 5-0. Mixon has just been so consistently good for North Georgia. It's such an advantage for Coach Davenport with all the new faces in the starting lineup this season after a couple of seniors graduated, a couple of injuries. This season, he can confidently etch Mixon's name into the batting order. She started every game the last 2 years, only missing a couple of games over the 200-plus she's played in her career here at UNG. She's always there for this team when they need her there.
Yeah, and she's always been one of those consistent players that's in the starting lineup for the Nighthawks because, you know, as the season's gone on, it's really nothing is really guaranteed to be in the starting lineup.
Mixon strikes again, grounds this one into left field as she's going to score another run here for the Nighthawks as Madison Simmons comes home. Gracie Mixon 2 for 2 today with 4 RBIs, and it's a 6-0 lead for North Georgia.
You know, one thing we saw, because now Mariah Wicker is up to bat, in crucial moments last year, Wicker able to hit some clutch home runs. You know, one would be really nice for the Nighthawks right now as that would propel them up 10-0 over Flagler.
And just a little over a year ago, Mariah Wicker was named the 2023 Peach Ball Conference Tournament MVP. Made some big plays in the Southeast Regional, Super Regional, some highlight plays in the National Championship against Grand Valley State as well. But we've mentioned she has had her struggles as of late, but really all season. I don't think that Mariah Wicker has really played up to the standard that she's used to playing at, and she has caught fire at just the right time here late in the season as she hits this one into shallow left field, and that's going to be caught for out number 2. Tegan thought about going home, but she's going to stay put at third. Bases will remain loaded. And Kinnear, if Laval Masonette made a break for it to home, Kinnear had a good chance of making the play to give us our 3rd out. Nighthawks return to the top of the batting order here with Katie Ward. Katie Ward 0 for 2 so far in this matchup. Has grounded out on both of her plate appearances this season. But how about Katie Ward being thrown into a big spot after Jolie Lester went down with an injury, who's been leading off the batting order for the Nighthawks all season long. Lester went down, and then Coach Davenport had to experiment with the lineup a bit. We saw
Mariah Wicker.
Yep, at some point leading off for North Georgia. Even saw Sophie Mooney a couple of times do that. And over the past month or so, it's been the sophomore Katie Ward leading off the batting order for the Nighthawks, and she has been absolutely up to the task. Been a breakout season for the sophomore.
Yeah, when you look at the lineup, I remember when Jolie announced when her season was over, my first thought was for Katie Ward to step into the leadoff role, which she eventually did. You noted there Mariah Wicker. I believe Sophie Mooney was the first batter to go in that leadoff spot to replace Jolie Lester, and then it was Mariah Wicker, and then came in, I believe, a little bit later on, Katie Ward came in, as you said, really for the past month. So it's been fun to watch this Nighthawk team, being able to adjust to it. And
North Georgia squad has had a good mix of younger players in their first or second year, some sophomores stepping up big in some moments, and mixing that with the 10 seniors that are on this Nighthawk roster who have made some big plays this season as well. The 2-2 pitch to Katie Ward is outside for ball 3. Count is full again with the bases loaded.
If I'm Katie Ward, don't swing at this next pitch.
Tough situation here with 2 outs, and Ward does swing. She just tips this one foul, so she's going to get another crack at it here. And Katie Ward has started all season long, was batting cleanup for the Nighthawks to begin the season, has soon been inserted into the top of the batting order. Devin, you had a chance to talk to her a couple weeks back as she takes the payoff pitch. This stays in the infield. Out is made at second base. And that's going to keep North Georgia to 1 run in the top of the third. A 6-0 lead for the Nighthawks in this winner-go-home game. Saints got to find some runs quickly here when we come back for the bottom of the third inning on the Nighthawk Sports Network.
How do you make history? In St. Augustine, Florida, Flagler College stands as a beacon where the lion-hearted can forge new paths. Here, your courage finds its name, and ambition finds its home. Inspired by the visionary Henry Flagler, you don't just learn, you create, innovate, and find where you truly belong. So how do you make history? It starts with you, right here. Flagler College, where history begins.
Back with you here on the Nighthawk Sports Network. 6-0 is your score. Nighthawks on top of the Saints as we head to the bottom of the third inning here in this winner-go-home game between the number 2 seed North Georgia Nighthawks and the number 7 seed Flagler College Saints. 2 Peach Belt Conference foes squaring off for the 7th time this season. They faced off in the regular season in a 3-game series. North Georgia ended up coming away with the win in that series. Took down Flagler twice in the Peach Belt Conference tournament. Now this is the second time that they're facing off in the Southeast Regional. Tybee Denton still in the circle for North Georgia, and her first assignment of this inning is going to be the catcher, Emily Ritchie. Denton gets the signal. The 1-0 pitch to Ritchie is going to be upstairs for ball 2. Not surprised to see the Saints rolling with the exact same lineup that we saw in the last game. Flagler has been operating with a shortened roster this season. 6 players, well over 160 at-bats this year. They really have around 9 players that have consistently carried the batting load for them, and it has worked well for them this season.
Yeah, it looks like it has worked well as they have been able to take up the next step. But, sometimes I wonder how fatigued this team gets, because when you look at it, let's compare North Georgia and Flagler and their roster. And I had to do PA, which is the public address announcing earlier today, and I had to do it for the North Georgia Flagler game yesterday. And when the NCAA tournament comes around, normally you do starting lineups for any regular game. But with the NCAA tournament, you also have to do non-starters. And then when looking at North Georgia's roster, when you looked at North Georgia's roster, you had 10 to 15 players that you had to read that weren't starting the game. So compared to when I had to do Flaglers, you only had 5 players. So, if there are injuries that come to the lineup, it becomes very tough for them. And even if you do need to sub out players, it's like we only have 5 other options we can go to.
Denton just walked her second batter of the game. Still looking for her first strikeout today. Yeah, it's worked well for both squads. North Georgia with one of the deeper rosters that you'll see in Division II softball ending up in the regional tournament. And Flagler, like we said, only about 9 players that get some really consistent run on the squad. About 5 or 6 non-starters on this Saints squad, but this has worked well for them as well in this situation here in a winner-go-home game against the defending national champions, trying to advance to tomorrow's game against Francis Marion and beyond into the Super Regional. Denton pitches ball 1 upstairs after back-to-back strikes. Hannah Smith up to bat here for the Saints, and Hannah Smith has had a fantastic season this year for Flagler as she pops this one up, and it's going to stay fair. A little blooper over to shallow right. The Nighthawks are able to get the out at second. Right play there made by the Nighthawks, and Smith is going to be safe at first.
Yeah, North Georgia has about 9 more players than Flagler does on their roster. About 9 to 10. If I just eyeballed it here on the side of our window here from North Georgia, and then going through the stat roster of Flagler. So about 9 to 10 players that North Georgia has more players than Flagler. So you got to imagine that there's not as much depth when you go to Flagler, but that's a good thing at the same time, because that means you have that steady core of people, because you don't want to split a team into like a faction. You have the starters and then you have the bench players.
Crump hits one into center field. Mallory Parker is there to make the play for out number 2. Having to run up about 8 or so steps to give us our second out of this inning. Hannah Smith still over there on first. It's going to bring up the left fielder, Kyla Kinnear. Kinnear coming into today, 163 at-bats for her as she grounds this one over to Ward, who throws to first. Can't get it there on time. Saints trying to mount a 2-out rally here. Runners now on first and second. That's going to bring the third baseman.
Now batting number 32, Mackenzie Smith.
Mackenzie Smith up to bat. Smith on her last plate appearance flew out. Went 0 for 2 in that first matchup against North Georgia in this regional tournament. She fouls this one just off the top of her bat. It's going to be an 0-1 count. And Mackenzie Smith may only be listed as a junior on the roster, but she's been around this Flagler softball program for quite some time. This is her 5th season as a Saint. Started every game last season. Led the team in home runs last year with 8. She fouls another ball out of play. While she didn't see a field a ton in the 3 seasons prior, mainly due to an injury in 2022, she's very familiar with this program and has taken leaps over these last 2 years. She's down in the count 0-2 against Tybee Denton. And the 0-2, this one skies deep into left field. Mariah Wicker is there to make the routine play for out number 3. Saints scoreless through 3 innings. Nighthawks are going to try to add to this 6-0 lead in the top of the 4th inning when we come back for this NCAA Division II Southeast Regional Tournament match.
Number 32, Kyle Hornsby. Inside the 30. Touchdown. Michaela Burgess. An incredible finish by Hall.
The NCAA and its member schools offer nearly 500,000 college athletes a path to go pro in something other than sports. Learn more at ncaa.org.
How much time is left? back with you here on the Nighthawk Sports Network for inning number 4. It's win or go home between the Nighthawks and the Saints. Nighthawks up to bat here in the top of the 4th inning. It's going to be the senior Georgia Blair leading things off here for North Georgia.
Blair.
Seen really Georgia Blair take over on the batting side of things for North Georgia this season, especially really since Jolie Lester went down. She's a team leading 17 home runs this season. And, compared to that to Mallory Parker, who's in second place, who has 7 home runs. That's 10 more runs than second place.
Yeah, a lot of the success that the Nighthawks have had this season can be traced back to Georgia Blair having a career best season in her senior year as she takes ball 2. Her batting average, runs, hits, home runs, RBIs, slugging percentage, walks drawn, on-base percentage, you name it, all career highs for the senior Georgia Blair. Takes the 2-0 from Sheets. Blair now up in the count, 3-0, drew a walk on one of her previous plate appearances in this one. And the 3-0 to Blair outside for ball 4. Like we said earlier, it's just so hard to keep the Nighthawks off base, whether they're using their eye, not taking a pitch that they don't like, or adding to one of their 500-plus hits this season.
Yeah, and that's one thing we've seen in this Nighthawk game. So in this game between North Georgia and Flagler is Nighthawks coming out very, very aggressive in terms of the sense of, okay, we're going to take everything that we can get.
Parker grounds this one into center field. Georgia Blair is going to slide in safely to third. The runners on the corners for the Nighthawks as Parker punches one into right.
Yeah, Mallory Parker following up right there with Georgia Blair. It's a good combo to have in the lineup. Georgia Blair, Mallory Parker right next to each other. And then you got Mary Seal Brumby up, the sophomore out of Cedartown. She's had a really good season with North Georgia, really taking that leap because, we've had that adversity with the starting lineup. You have Jolie Lester out. You have Sophie Mooney, who really has kind of came back but really is not in the lineup all that often. To see somebody like Mary Seal come in big and step in for a player like Sophie Mooney, because, I talked to her a couple of weeks ago. She's really made an immediate impact.
It looks like the Nighthawks have a pinch runner who is now on second, and that's going to be number 1, Caitlin Johnson. Made her way to second base, coming in as a pinch runner. She's primarily been doing that this year as Brumby grounds one into center field. Nighthawks up 7-0, make that 8-0, and in a blink of an eye from second base, Johnson comes home. Nighthawks now in run rule territory, up 8-0, and right on cue, like you said, Devin, Brumby has made some big plays for North Georgia as of late. She makes another big one there, adding 2 runs up on the scoreboard.
And the good thing about it is she's only a sophomore, so that means things are only most of the time things are only going to get better from here because, Sophie Mooney, you had Jolie Lester, who was on pace to have a really, really good season, the leadoff hitter for the Nighthawks, and now, she went down, and then Sophie Mooney went down against the regular season series against Columbus State, and then, you had Brumby hit 2 home runs, taking in over 4. Sophie Mooney, even one of them being a grand slam. So, always seeing that. She got a base double right there, scored 2 more runs. North Georgia up top 8-0. Can't ask anything better from your rising sophomore star in Mary Seal Brumby.
And last season, Mary Seal Brumby had to sit behind 2 superstar players, with Olivia Sinkfield holding it down at first base for most of the season for the Nighthawks. And then you had Sophie Mooney serving as that utility player for the Nighthawks. Saw her play first at times, saw her in the circle at times, also up to bat a lot as well. One of the best batters in Division II softball. And so Brumby is kind of an example of how deep this North Georgia squad is and how deep Coach Davenport's teams can be. Brumby's had her chance to show what she's capable of this season. Makes you wonder what else Coach Davenport has in his dugout. And speaking of the dugout, it's going to be Caroline Branch coming out to pinch run here for the Nighthawks over at second base.
See, not Mary Seal, but the Caroline Branch, one of those first options Davenport goes to when subbing a runner in. Seen that pretty much, I'd say, almost every game we've seen this season.
Yeah.
That Nighthawks are able to get a player on base late in the game.
If a pinch runner is coming out of the dugout and Mariah Wicker is starting, you can expect to see Caroline Branch be one of the first faces out of the dugout, along with Caitlin Johnson, also with Madison Cosgrove as well, one of the options.
Madison Cosgrove, Tegan, Laval, Masonette, one of them as well.
This is going to be kept in the infield as Madison Simmons is going to be out for out number one. Didn't get the chance to talk a lot about Madison Simmons on this last at-bat, but during that commercial break when the Nighthawks were coming off the field, the Nighthawks were rallied around Madison Simmons, and I believe Mariah Wicker was in the middle of them as well. And those are two veterans on this North Georgia squad. And you can imagine the conversation in that circle with the seniors trying to rally this team. It was a 6-0 lead at the time, but still no lead is safe. They know what's at stake here. They're trying to be the first team to repeat as national champions for the first time in over 20 years. Season's on the line right here. And it looks like whatever that conversation was definitely paid off. A couple of RBIs in this top of the fourth inning puts the Nighthawks up 8-0.
Yeah, and you know, one thing with this Nighthawks squad, you mentioned about the senior leadership. We've got I believe it's 10 seniors on this Nighthawks squad, so a lot of them moving on after the season.
Tegan hits one into left field, and that's going to be caught by the Saints for out number 2. Kyla Kinnear making the play. We got a lot of veterans on this North Georgia squad. It's going to be interesting to see what the team looks like next season, especially when it comes to their bullpen. All of the pitchers in the Nighthawks bullpen are seniors this season.
Yeah, that's going to be something, watch out for next year. What is North Georgia going to do on the pitching staff? Because currently right now, all of our pitchers on our roster are all leaving after this, are all leaving at the end of the season.
Riley Moody up to bat, takes strike one from Sheets. Riley Moody, a junior, a new face on this North Georgia squad, filling in at shortstop for the long-time shortstop Maddie Perry, graduated after this year. And Moody hits this one over to her counterpart shortstop in Sydney Stewart for out number 3. The Nighthawks put a couple of runs up on the board in the top half of the inning. They lead this one 8-0. Saints got to find some action here up to bat, get these bats warmed up. Got some work to do when we come back from this short commercial break on the Nighthawk Sports Network. Nothing is your score in this game number 5 of the NCAA Division II Softball Southeast Regional Tournament. Bottom of the 4th inning. Saints looking for some life here up to bat. Still going up against the PBC Pitcher of the Year in Tybee Denton. It's going to be Riley Konowalchuk, the designated player, who leads this inning off here for the Saints. Has one of the 3 hits for them so far in this game. Other 2 coming from Kyla Kinnear. As Konowalchuk slaps one into shallow center field. This one, shouldn't even say shallow center, didn't even get past second as Riley Moody comes up with the play.
One thing too with this, Flagler certainly an up-and-coming team, but the thing that's been tough for them is, you look over the past couple of years, they just picked up their first win against the Nighthawks since the 2019 season. So it's been kind of a tough stretch for them to beat North Georgia. They lost yesterday against them, and things aren't looking so good right now. So, really a reversal because, as
Kirsten James keeps this one in the infield, easy play there between Mixon and Brumby to give us our second out.
And another thing, to go on to that, back in 2019 on a doubleheader day, Flagler was able to pick up a 7-3 win, a 1-0 win against North Georgia. Now, albeit that was in St. Augustine, and then their last win came here in Dahlonega back on March 23rd against the Nighthawks, picking up their first win in a 3-game series against North Georgia, where they'd end up losing that one 2-1. But really, it's been North Georgia flying, really, because they've only had 3 wins since 2018 over this Nighthawks squad.
Yeah, and it feels like forever ago, since this is the 7th time that these two teams have seen each other this season. Like you said, Devin, that first matchup of the regular season, the Saints came to Haynes and Carolyn Hill Stadium and took down the Nighthawks on their home turf. Not many teams can say that they've done that this season. So the Saints have that in their favor. They know what it takes to win here against the Nighthawks on the road. Of course, this is a bigger spot here in the NCAA regional tournament, but they have what it takes to climb back into games against this North Georgia squad. We've seen Flagler mount a couple of comebacks in the Peach Belt Conference tournament, and this team is not going to go away without a fight.
Yeah, it's been kind of tough for them in Dahlonega. When you look at the top down at everything, where they've picked up their wins against North Georgia, all of them have been in St. Augustine, but they only have 2 of them that have been picked up here in Dahlonega.
The 3-0 from Denton. She gets a rebound strike here to make the count 3-1. Going up against Paige Maceda up to bat. And she is the epitome of consistency. Maceda has started in every single game of her collegiate career. Hasn't missed a single game in the past 3 seasons. She really is the Iron Man of this team, always available for Coach Grant, which is such a huge advantage for Flagler.
Yeah, having that Ironman, being able to witness the re-rise of the program again must be something there too. But that's an everyday starter right there for the Saints.
Saints return to the top of their batting order. Flips back to Sydney Stewart. She was hit by pitch, and she's grounded out on her 2 plate appearances today. Stewart, a member of the Peach Belt Conference All-Conference team, hits this one into left, and that's going to land fair up the left field line for Stewart. Wicker throws to third. Nighthawks can't make a play, though, and runners are now in scoring position for the Saints, and this is arguably the best that they've looked so far in this matchup against North Georgia. So now you got 2 runners in scoring position with Emily Ritchie up to bat, and with the home run abilities of this Flagler squad, they are always in games. Long ball has been Flagler's preferred way of scoring this season. As Tybee's pitch to Ritchie is going to be a strike coming into this weekend. Flagler with 76 home runs on the season. That's the 9th most in the country. Their home runs kept them in a lot of PBC tournament games and helped them earn another rematch against North Georgia. The 0-1 from Tybee Denton is upstairs for ball 1.
One thing that's working for both teams is that when you get to tournament play, you're going to be playing against really good opponents, and opponents most of the time that are outside your conference. Not to say that people inside the conference aren't going to be in your region, but or in your regional tournament. But the one thing that benefits both the Nighthawks and the Saints in this matchup is this is a familiar territory, playing twice in the Peach Belt tournament, playing 3 times in the regular season, and now playing 2 times in the NCAA regional tournament. And that's one thing, because Francis Marion, we're in the Southeast region pod number 2.
As Ritchie grounds this one to Ward, throws it to Brumby at first on time for out number 3. 4 consecutive scoreless innings from the Saints is going to take us to the top of the 5th. Nighthawks looking to add to this 8-0 lead in a winner-go-home game against Flagler when we come back on the Nighthawk Sports Network.
We have a long tradition of athletics at the University of North Georgia. For the past 50 years, our athletic programs have been making a difference for our university. And today, I'm really excited to talk about how we will take that to the next level. When you think about elite athletics, you think about elite performance. Mary Rob, tell me what that means to you.
So elite performance at the University of North Georgia is unique because we have a value proposition unlike anybody else in this country, where we're able to perform at the highest level because of our connections with our Corps of Cadets and our College of Health Sciences and Professions, coupled with our professionals from coaches, athletic trainers, support staff in our Department of Athletics, where we're preparing our student athletes to battle on the field of competition, in the classroom, and in our community. We'll be elite in everything we do.
So today, we are really excited to announce our strategic bet, where we are going to deliver elite performance, elite competition, and the most value-added.
Back with you here on the Nighthawk Sports Network. 8-0 is your score. Top of the 5th inning in game number 5 of the NCAA Division II Softball Southeast Regional Tournament. And Gracie Mixon back up to bat here for North Georgia, leading off this inning for the Nighthawks. And Gracie Mixon has got flames coming off of her bat. 2 for 2 on the day with 4 RBIs. It's almost unfortunate that she's leading off this inning as she grounds this one to third. Throw to first gets there on time for out number 1. Mixon in both of her plate appearances today has had runners on, and it's paid off, and she proves that she's human here. She's going to be out at first. Brings Mariah Wicker up to bat.
Yeah, we were discussing about it earlier. You know, it's kind of interesting. If you watched North Georgia last year, you know, Mariah Wicker was pretty much an automatic starter for the Nighthawks last year, and it was kind of a shock when you've been around the team for a while, and to then see Mariah Wicker taken out of the lineup. Now, some of it is due to being a performance-related issue, a little bit to it, you know, and that certainly plays a factor into it. But you know, to see Wicker come back out there in the starting lineup and, you know, get back out there on defense, go back out there in the outfield, and then make some plays it's always a good thing to see.
And Mariah Wicker, whether she's performing well or not, always has a big smile on her face. She brings so much positive energy to this North Georgia squad. You can see her, if you're live in attendance at these North Georgia games, she goes to get the lineups from Coach Davenport when the plate meeting's going on, and she always makes sure to wave to the crowd, a big smile on her face. And remember at senior day a couple of weeks ago, Coach Davenport said one of his biggest question marks going into the offseason is who's going to get the starting lineups from him next year.
Yeah, that's going to be something for North Georgia to figure out in the offseason. But, you know, and you think about it this way, too, with you know, everybody goes through their own personal struggles, right? And when you think about it, you know, you mentioned earlier, you know, she had a couple big home runs against Columbus State in the Peach Belt Tournament Championship last year, Peach Belt Tournament MVP. And then a year later, like, looking at the Peach Belt Tournament this year, you know, it's like, okay, the tournament MVP isn't even in the lineup. So it's just been a kind of a whirlwind season for Mariah Wicker. But good to see her that, you know, coach's confidence in her, put her back out there, and she's kind of looking like she's living up to expectations.
The 2-2 pitch to Mariah keeps this one in the infield at third. And the play is going to be made by Mackenzie Smith, who makes the grab for out number 2. And it looks like we're going to have a pinch hitter up to bat here, and it's going to be the Peach Belt Conference All-Conference first-team designated player, Grayson Perry.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. Pinch hitting for the Nighthawks, number 3,
Grayson Perry has been a consistent starter for the Nighthawks this season. We just mentioned earning honors for the first team all-conference in the PBC as the DP, which is a very competitive spot as well.
It is indeed. I mean, we've seen a multitude of players kind of go in and out of that lineup. I remember last year, Sophie Mooney, she was in the DP spot a lot last year. So we've seen a couple players rotate through that, and especially with injuries this year, we've seen that position really rotate a lot.
The 1-0 to Perry is going to be inside for strike one. And we mentioned at the beginning of this game that hosting for the Super Regionals is still very much up in the air. North Georgia, the number 2 seed. Wingate, the number 1 seed in the tournament. And we have some big developments from the other side of the Southeast Regional bracket. Wingate facing off against Lander. The Bearcats up 3-0 in the top of the 5th inning, but that game has been suspended. We don't have the exact reason as to why yet, but as of right now, that game's going to be picked up tomorrow at a time that's going to be decided later.
Very odd situation. Although, you know, one of our schools that is playing in the Southeast Regional Pod 2, Francis Marion, over there in Florence, South Carolina, right next to Darlington, South Carolina, which is...
This is driven high and deep into left field, and Grayson Perry hits a big home run, a solo shot to left field. Nighthawks lead this one 9-0 as Perry punches one into the terrace.
Yeah, this is what the Nighthawks needed this weekend, and really after, you know, last weekend losing to Columbus State, this is what you could say what the doctor ordered. You know, this is the prescription they needed, is they needed to come out hot, out front, and take no prisoners. I mean, and we're seeing that so far. And that's what the key for Nighthawks going forward, if they do end up winning this game, is to bring this pressure to Francis Marion if they do end up winning this game.
How about that from Grayson Perry? Didn't get the start in this win-or-go-home game. It was Tegan Laval Masonette who got the start as the designated player in this matchup. Grayson Perry comes in to pinch hit. Hasn't played in quite a few hours. That game earlier today starting at noon, and comes in and hits a big home run. Solo shot puts North Georgia up 9-0. And another 2-out rally here that the Nighthawks are going on. Count evened up at 1-1 for the superstar senior Georgia Blair, who grounds this to third. Throw to first, gets it there on time for out number 3. But a solo shot from Grayson Perry makes this a 9-0 lead for North Georgia as we head to the bottom of the 5th inning. Saints down to their potential final 3 outs. Season on the line for Flagler. We'll see if North Georgia can close things out when we come back on the Nighthawk Sports Network.
I am an NCAA student athlete.
And I pledge to be a champion of unity
on my team, on my campus, and in my community.
I pledge to embrace differences and strive for inclusion and collaboration.
I pledge to stand against racism, hate, and discrimination.
I pledge to strive for love, care, and forgiveness.
I pledge to stand against silence, deceit, and obscurity.
I pledge to strive for dialogue, truth, and understanding.
I pledge to stand against fear and doubt.
I pledge to strive for trust and belief in one another.
I pledge to stand against complacency and stagnancy.
I pledge to strive for change and growth.
I commit to supporting my fellow student athletes in all circumstances that impact them.
I commit to both choosing unity personally and encouraging it for all.
I pledge these things because we are stronger together.
United as one.
Back with you here on the Nighthawk Sports Network, and it comes down to this bottom of the 5th inning for the Saints. Down 9 runs, need to start a comeback here, but they're going to have to face off against a new pitcher in the circle for the Nighthawks. Now in the circle, another senior for North Georgia is number 9, Delaney Heberlin. Senior out of Eustis, Florida, stepping in for the Peach Belt Conference Pitcher of the Year Tybee Denton as Coach Davenport goes with another vet. All seniors, like we mentioned, in that bullpen for Coach Davenport. Delaney Heberlin's played in a lot of big games over the course of her career for North Georgia as she tries to close out Flagler. Moody throws to Brumby at first to get a quick first out in this bottom of the fifth as Hannah Smith has a short-lived appearance at the plate. So Tybee Denton wraps up her afternoon pitching 4 innings, allowing 4 hits, walked 3 batters, didn't record a strikeout. So a bit of a uncharacteristic game for Tybee Denton, at least when you look at the stat sheet for her game. You normally see her, record a lot of strikeouts in a game. Doesn't have one in this matchup. Didn't matter, though. She kept the Saints off the scoreboard through the first 4 innings. Now it's up to Delaney Heberlin to close things out here for the Nighthawks. As Crump pops this one up right back to Delaney Heberlin for out number 2. Saints are down to their potential final out. And it's going to be Kyla Kinnear who tries to keep Flagler's season alive. And if anybody's going to be in this situation, it's a good thing it's Kyla Kinnear. 2 for 2 on the day. She's been perfect in this matchup against North Georgia. She grounds this one, keeps it in the infield. Ward flips to first, and they get it there on time. A great play from this North Georgia infield is how this game is going to end. And North Georgia keeps their season alive, and they have punched a ticket to tomorrow's game against Francis Marion. And in a pressure spot, both of these teams in a win or go home situation, the Nighthawks prevail. And for the 6th time this season, they take down Flagler College as they end the Saints' historic season. Flagler season finally coming to an end here in the Southeast Regional Tournament. It's been a historic season for Flagler College. Got to give them their flowers, finishing the season at 35-24 this year. It's been a great season. Made the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2012. Most wins in a season since 2017. Multiple players making the Peach Ball Conference all-conference team, first and second teams. Got the co-coach of the year in Catherine Grant. And the season is over now for Flagler, but Devin, the future looks bright for this Flagler squad.
Yes, it does, and it's unfortunate. You really had tough opponents. You couldn't get out of the Peach Belt, unfortunately, for Flagler, and I bet they were really licking their chops to finally play some competition that was outside of their conference. But one positive to see with Flagler, I mean, they were an 18-win team last year. To go all the way to a 35-23 win, get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. And one thing, this Flagler team, Robert, they're going to be back. They're going to be back in the NCAA tournament next year. You're kind of seeing that sudden uprise because that doesn't just happen overnight in college athletics. It's not, you can go out and get players, enter the transfer portal, and come over to your college. But it's a little bit more difficult than it is, let's say, compared to professional sports. But to take a 15-game leap, or more, it's 17-game leaps. Win 17 more games, not an easy thing to do just in a one-year turnaround in college athletics. So, big props to all the Flagler and people over at Flagler College. They're a good team up and coming. And, North Georgia this year, had that separation in the Peach Belt, but I think they're going to close that gap next year.
Yeah, big congratulations to Flagler on their phenomenal season that comes to an end against the reigning national champions. North Georgia's season still alive, looking to go back-to-back as national champions for the first time in over 20 years. Their season stays alive, and they'll face off against Francis Marion tomorrow at noon in that matchup against the Patriots. And as we look forward to that matchup, coming at noon tomorrow, these two teams played earlier today. Francis Marion came away with the 2-1 win in a pitching dueling battle between Kristen Davis and Alyssa Poston. As we preview that matchup, it was a low-scoring affair, and Poston who is one of the best pitchers in Division II softball, has started both games of this tournament against Columbus State and North Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see who gets to start tomorrow. I can imagine it is going to be Poston getting the third consecutive start. I also wouldn't be surprised to see if Tybee Denton, the PVC pitcher of the year, gets to start for North
Honestly,
Georgia.
you really can't go with wrong with any of them. I think North Georgia will probably end up going with Kristen Kept, Francis Marion contained, and that's going to be the key. I'm going to start with Francis Marion first. The key for Francis Marion is to keep this Nighthawk team contained. We saw it in the Flagler games. North Georgia able to explode offensively. I mean, they're able to take over control, and we saw that a lot last year when they won that national championship, and that's something you don't want to see from a team in the NCAA tournament, is to be able to take control and go over. Now, North Georgia, tomorrow they're going to have to win 2 wins they're going to have to beat 2 games against Francis Marion, which is going to be tough, but Francis Marion, key, I would say you still roll with Poston. I think that's who you have to go with tomorrow. You're able to keep a North Georgia team contained. You know, and the frustrating thing is you only had 8 hits for this Nighthawk squad, but only 1 run for show for it. So that's going to be the key for Francis Marion tomorrow. Now, North Georgia, you need to approach this as if you approached the 2 Flagler games. You need to come out hot and start off hot and apply that pressure immediately and not get frustrated with yourself. I mean, you had those 8 hits. North Georgia today finished with 8 hits today. 8 hits in both games. This time, instead of 1 run, they had 9 runs and shut out the other team. So that's going to be the key for North Georgia. Make sure everything is contained and bring that energy, because you could feel the tension in the matchup earlier, because Francis Marion really has been the toughest team that the Nighthawks have seen all season. So that's going to be the key for this North Georgia team, is to apply that pressure instead of let the pressure kind of come in and it's put out as tension. So they need to be able to jump the gate and be able to apply pressure to that Patriot squad if they want to pick up the win. And, one thing with North Georgia, they're going to have to pick up 2 wins against Francis Marion, which, when you look at it, that's going to be a very, very tough thing to do tomorrow.
Absolutely. We should be in for an action-packed final day of the NCAA Division II Softball Southeast Regional. Game 1 tomorrow will be played at noon. It's Francis Marion again taking on North Georgia. And then if the Nighthawks are able to come away with the win in that game at noon, we'll have another game following that one scheduled for 2:30 p.m. tomorrow. If Francis Marion's able to come away with the game at noon tomorrow, then they'll be headed to the Southeast Super Regional Tournament. Again, hosts for that still up in the air after that game between Lander and Wingate was postponed, but back here at Haynes and Carolyn Hill Stadium, the Nighthawks, a top 10 team in the country, their season is still alive. North Georgia and Francis Marion tomorrow is going to be a fun one. Had a great day of softball today. On behalf of Devin Kupka and the rest of the NSN team, this is Robert DiClemente saying thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you spending your day with us. We hope you tune in tomorrow for a great matchup between the number 2 and number 3 seeds in this tournament. North Georgia taking on Francis Marion tomorrow at noon.